Every morning, roughly 100 million Americans pour cereal into a bowl. Most of them will see the name Kellogg on the box and think absolutely nothing of it. But behind that name is one of the strangest stories in American business. Two brothers who hated each other. A health resort where the richest people in the country lined up for yogurt enemas. An accidental discovery that was never supposed to leave the building. And beliefs so dark that the company has spent a century trying to make you forget them. This is where your breakfast actually came from. The Kellogg brothers grew up in Battle Creek, Michigan, in a strict Seventh-day Adventist household. Their parents genuinely believed the second coming of Jesus Christ was happening any day now. Formal education was considered a waste of time. Why send your children to school when the world is about to end? John Harvey Kellogg was the golden child. Sickly as a boy, with one lung destroyed by tuberculosis, he was still brilliant enough to catch the attention of the church founders, who paid for his medical school and handed him the keys to their health institute in 1876. He was 24. He renamed it the Battle Creek Sanitarium, a word he actually invented. It did not exist before John Harvey Kellogg put it on a building. His younger brother Will was not so lucky. Born 8 years later, Will received almost no affection from anyone. His father pulled him out of school at 13 and put him to work in the family broom factory 6 days a week. John bullied him relentlessly. Years later, Will would say 5 words that explained everything about his childhood. As a boy, I never learned to play. When Will was 20, John hired him at the sanitarium, and for the next 25 years, Will ran every part of his brother's empire. The finances, the staff, the food production, the publishing house, but John treated him like a servant. He required Will to run alongside him while he rode his bicycle around the grounds. He made Will take dictation while he sat on the toilet. He made Will trim his beard and polish his shoes every single morning, every day for a quarter century at $6 a week. Will was the chief of staff in everything but title, and John never missed an opportunity to remind him who was really in charge. But here is what made the sanitarium extraordinary. It worked, or at least people believed it did. At its peak, the Battle Creek Sanitarium employed over 1,000 people and treated 10,000 patients a year. Henry Ford came for tune-ups. Thomas Edison came to recharge. Amelia Earhart visited before her famous flights. President Taft, the Rockefellers, J.C. Penney, and Sojourner Truth all came for treatment. The most powerful people in America traveled to this small Michigan town to be treated by a man who dressed entirely in white and kept a white cockatoo on his shoulder. The treatments were something else entirely. 46 different kinds of baths, machines that pumped 15 quarts of water per minute into a patient's colon, vibrating chairs, artificial sun baths, and yogurt enemas, because John believed that pumping yogurt into your intestines was the key to perfect health. But here is where it gets truly strange. John Harvey Kellogg was obsessed with the idea that food controlled human behavior. Specifically, he believed that flavorful food, anything spicy, rich, or savory, inflamed sexual desire. And sexual desire, in his view, was the root of nearly all disease and moral failure. He wrote entire books about it. He prescribed bland, unstimulating diets to suppress what he called the passions. Plain crackers, boiled grains, nothing with any flavor whatsoever. The blander the food, the purer the person. That was his actual medical philosophy. And that obsession is what led him to start experimenting with processed grains in the first place. He was not trying to invent breakfast. He was trying to create food so boring it would make people stop thinking about sex. And somehow, that is exactly how cornflakes were born. Now here is the moment that changed everything, and it happened completely by accident. One night in 1894, the brothers were experimenting with wheat dough, trying to create an easily digestible bread for the sanitarium patients. John got called away on an emergency and left the dough sitting out. By the next morning, it had gone stale. Rather than throw it out, they ran it through the rollers anyway. What came out were thin, crispy flakes. Nothing like that had ever been produced before. They had just invented flaked cereal. The patients loved it. The brothers started a small mail-order business selling the flakes to former guests. If you are enjoying this deep dive into how the products you use every day were actually created, take a second to subscribe. We cover stories like this every week, and most of them are stranger than you would ever expect. Now, you might think the brothers celebrated their invention together. You might think this was the moment that brought them closer. It was the opposite. This is where decades of resentment finally exploded. Will wanted to add sugar and sell cornflakes to the general public. John refused. He saw cereal as medicine, not as a product. Will saw what John could not. There were far more healthy people who wanted a quick breakfast than sick people who needed bland hospital food. In 1906, Will finally broke away. He founded the Battle Creek Toasted Cornflake Company, added a little salt and sugar, and did something John never would have done. He poured money into advertising, not a little money. Nearly a third of the company's revenue went straight into ads. One of his earliest campaigns told women to wink at their grocer for a free sample of cornflakes. Sales increased 15 times in New York City alone. He put his own signature on every box so customers could tell his product from the dozens of knockoffs flooding the market. And there were dozens. A former sanitarium patient named C.W. Post had already taken some of John's recipes while working off his medical bills in the kitchen. Post launched his own cereal company and was making $3 million a year by 1900. By 1911, over 100 cereal brands had sprung up in Battle Creek. Companies with names like Corn Kinks and Corn O'Plenty appeared overnight. The town went from a dusty religious outpost to the cereal capital of the world. But Will crushed them all, and he did it by understanding something no other cereal maker grasped at the time. He was not just selling food, he was selling a new way to eat breakfast. Before cornflakes, the American morning meal was bacon, cured meats, porridge, and fried potatoes. Heavy, hot, time-consuming. Will marketed cornflakes as modern, quick, and clean. Pour it from the box, add milk, and you are done. He built national distribution through railroads. He pioneered branded packaging at a time when most food was still sold from barrels. He turned a hospital side project into one of the first mass consumer brands in American history. By the mid-1920s, the Kellogg Company was a corporate empire, and Will Keith Kellogg was one of the richest men in the country. Today, Kellogg products are sold in over 180 countries. John was furious. He started selling his own cereal under the Kellogg name. Will sued him. John sued back. The lawsuits dragged on for nearly a decade, all the way to the Michigan Supreme Court. The central question was simple. Who was the real Kellogg? Will won. John never forgave him. The brothers barely spoke again for the rest of their lives. But what makes this story truly uncomfortable is what John Harvey Kellogg did with his fame. After the cereal wars, he turned his attention to something far darker than breakfast. He became one of America's most prominent supporters of eugenics, the belief that the human race could be improved through selective breeding. This movement, now universally condemned, was at the time supported by major universities, politicians, and respected institutions across the country. John founded an organization called the Race Betterment Foundation, which promoted sterilization of people deemed unfit and hosted national conferences on so-called racial improvement. He sponsored contests at state fairs where families were judged for genetic fitness. He supported racial segregation, and when he died in 1943, he left his entire estate, not to medicine, not to nutrition, but to that foundation. The cereal company has quietly distanced itself from that history ever since. His brother took a very different path. Will Keith Kellogg spent the last decades of his life giving his fortune away. He created the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, which still exists today as one of the largest philanthropic organizations on the planet. Its mission is helping children who cannot afford medical care and education. The foundation was inspired by his own grandson, who fell from a window and was permanently disabled. Will was stunned to discover that even his enormous wealth could not find adequate children's medical care anywhere in southern Michigan. He dedicated everything to making sure no child would face that problem again. The boy who was never allowed to play spent his final years making sure other children could. So the next time you pour a bowl of cereal, know this. That box exists because two brothers who could not stand each other accidentally left some dough out overnight. One brother used his fame to try to decide who deserved to have children. The other gave everything he had to the children who needed it most. And somehow both of their legacies ended up inside the same box on your kitchen table. Let us know in the comments which part of this story surprised you the most. We'll see you in the next one.